All right, welcome back, Prospect Live viewers, to the second week, the second edition of our MLB Draft show. Of course, chronicling the 2021 draft extra early. Joining me today is Joe Doyle from the site. Joe, we've got a lot to talk about. PG National took place last week. We had 5-6 full days of baseball. We had workouts. We had a handful of games. From all the different teams that were there, and got to look at some of the top prep talent really throughout the class, with only a handful of notable names missing, Marcelo Mayer unfortunately being one. Talking, what are your sort of big picture thoughts, takeaways from the event?
Well, I think the showcase in a lot of ways represented what most showcases do. The arms really, they showed out. There was a lot of really good arms. There was a lot of arms that had gotten noticeably bigger. There was a lot more velo than I think both of us expected from some guys. And there were a lot of guys that popped. The bats were few and far between, but the guys that we expected to hit, for the most part, did hit. I think more than anything, it was affirmation on a lot of guys. There's a lot of talent in this class, and there's a lot of talent up the middle like we were expecting. Yeah. And I don't know if it's going to have the headliners that 2020 had with Abel and Bitsko and Jared Kelly, but there's definitely some guys that are going to have first-round values on them.
Yeah, and I think, the depth is one of the things that really sort of stood out to me, particularly amongst the arms. And a lot of those guys, as you mentioned, showed out and really showed up in great form. You have to wonder how much that was really a product of the shutdown. I know we were talking sort of pre-show, and one of the things that I sort of thought about and I guess theorized was a lot of these pitchers, it's not the same with hitters having to face a variety of live pitching, see all different types of fastballs, all different types of secondary offerings to really be honed in a mid-season form. A lot of these guys could focus on minute areas of their arsenal, particular ways pitches moved, adding velocity, adding strength, whatever it might be. And, I know that the broadcast, and Darren Sutton did a great job of sort of highlighting it, is throughout, the broadcast, they talked about some of these guys' different workout regimens, doing a lot of stuff in the garage with just, pliability, but also, weight training. And I think guys that were able to invest in some sort of tech or have those training facilities in, isolation or whatever available to them to work on their pitch mix and, maybe tweak some things in terms of how pitches move, they could really come in and almost came out of the gates on fire. These short stints, they were really able to show the high end of their arsenal, the high end of the velocity, and go after guys with fastballs and mix in big secondaries when needed. And there were a ton of names that popped. I wanted to kick it over to you. Who are a couple names from the pitching prep class that popped for you at PG National?
So I think there's two ways that I want to answer this. The first way is with guys that we expected to be, dudes. And I think Andrew Painter came out and he provided everything that you want to see from a guy that has first-round helium. He's got the big velo. He's 94 to 96. He's got 3 pitches that he can land for strikes, and the slider, the changeup, and the curveball. He's a big 6'7" guy, long levers, able to repeat his delivery really, really well. And he just dominated. He dominated the hitting or the hitters, I should say. And he really just handled his business. And I'll let you do some of the other guys that kind of float in the top 50, but there are 2 guys for me that really stood out that aren't top 50 guys yet. But maybe they get there. And the first one was Max Debiek from the state, actually my state, the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. I got a chance to go out and watch Max a couple of times last year. And when he hit 97 at the PG showcase, that was a different Max Debiek. He brought that with a big breaking ball. He had an above average changeup that he was throwing in there for strikes that he was able to spot on the lower half of the zone. So he's a guy at 6'7", good body control for his size. He's a guy that I think, while it's always unlikely, he's the type of arm that if he has a big summer and he holds that velo throughout the rest of the year, he could sneak into, the top 40, top 50 picks in the 2021 draft. And then the other guy, and a lot of people have heard of Max Debiek, but the other guy was Jackson Jobe.
Yeah.
It is very rare that a guy that throws 95, 96, touches 97, and can spin a curveball at 3,200 RPMs is someone that I've never heard of. And that's exactly what he did. And he even flashed an average changeup in there as well. So it is way too early to put a guy with just pure stuff who's actually naturally a shortstop on our top 50 list. But he's broken into our top 200 now, and he's certainly a name that I want to follow throughout the rest of the summer because even if he ends up being a power reliever, that was some of the loudest stuff by far at the showcase.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention Job as well. And as you had mentioned, that slider, hitting 78, 82, sort of that perfect band in terms of velocity, and 2,900 to 3,200 RPMs in terms of raw spin on that pitch is remarkable. It was close to, I think, setting a PG record, which I think previously had been Carter Stewart, or still is Carter Stewart. But Painter was a guy that you had mentioned, and I wanted to go through his arsenal because I had the numbers actually in front of me as you said it. But 4 pitches, fastball was 94 to 95, raw spin was 2,300 to 2,500 on that pitch. We don't know about true spin and axis and all that sort of stuff. We'll get some of that data as the season rolls on. It's certainly something I'm going to be cognizant of and beating on a centric Laddie to make sure he gets some of those numbers for us. Slider was 81, 82, 2,500, 2,600. Certainly not Job numbers, but still very, very good when you're talking about a prep guy. Change up, low spin, but the velocity separation was of that 10 to 11, 12 mile per hour band, which is exactly what works. And then the curveball was 76, 77, 24, 2,500. And everything was, relatively tight. He threw strikes. I really like Painter a lot. I came away impressed by him. Guy I wasn't as impressed by was Christian Little. I know he's one of the younger guys in the class that was really high in him coming in. He's an imposing guy. He's already built like a major leaguer. There was a lot of muscle on this guy's frame. And the operation is pretty easy. But I have some questions about his arm action, as we were you guys had brought up in some of our Prospect Live chats with some still frames in terms of where his arm's at, in terms of, timing and where his plant foot is. But I didn't think, there was nothing about his stuff that really, in terms of movement profile, that had me going like, wow.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guys that did that I didn't necessarily know about. An actual Colorado prep arm was Cale Lansville. I remember him, LSU commit, really big body pitcher, nasty sort of 1-2 punch. He had a 4-seam fastball, slider combo. That fastball was, 92, 90, 95, 2,400, 2,500 RPMs, and the spin rate was working with it elevated and was working in a tight late breaking curveball. A pitch that wasn't really loopy, so it really blended really well on plane with an elevated fastball that had sort of that flat angle, and not a lot of projectability in the body. But I think he's a guy that might be able to tighten up a little bit. He's a little bit soft, but I was really impressed what I saw from him, and he's got a pitcher's build, a guy that looks like a starter long term. And just because I love my lanky, nasty lefties.
Oh, here he comes.
Travis Garnett from Maryland prep ranks. I 6'6" foot lefty. All knees, arms, and elbows, similar to Garrett Crochet in terms of what the angle is on that fastball and the slider. He was sitting 92, 94, 11.5 movement on that curveball or slider, as you might call it. And, it was a nasty, nasty bunch of pitches. He came out, I actually think, right after Lansville. And it was like boom, 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 boom. In that same day, we saw a pitcher who our friend Nathaniel Plotz, or at Eccentric Laddie, was talking about his takeaways from PG National in Gage Jump. Actually, I think he was Gage Jump. I'm incorrect. Jump was awesome. Sub 6 foot guy, but one of those guys that, because of the arm action and the arm angle and really low release point and attacking high in the zone, that fastball is really tough for hitters to square up and sort of jump on. Was dominating with the fastball, even 92, 93. It's a really fun operation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then he mixed in that, slider or curveball, breaking ball that he has. And it looked good. I mean, he didn't even have to use it as much, just simply because the fastball was so dominant. There were a ton of arms that I was really impressed with, even beyond that. Some other more random guys. I know one of the guys that was impressive just from a tools standpoint. It's kind of bridges the gap, I guess, a little bit here between hitters and pitchers. And I know one of your favorite guys and a local guy to me was Josh Baez.
Yeah, Josh Baez, kind of in the same vein, and we'll talk about Benny here in a little bit, but
Sure.
Josh is just, he's only 16 years old. He's still got 2 more months until he turns 17. He's a physical freak. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, something like that. Just an absolute monster. Clocked the biggest arm from the outfield at 97. And had some of the most impressive batting practice swings there was. But on the mound, you're right. He was 94, 95, showed a decent feel for a changeup. Mostly just blew hitters away with high fastballs. I mean, he didn't really show a great feel for being a true pitcher. He did have some nice sliders in there, but I think his ultimate home is probably going to be out on the grass.
Yeah.
The thing about Baez, and I do love Baez, I mean, you can't go wrong with tools. But he has not shown the ability yet to showcase the hit tool. Here at this stage, he really, and I know this is like crucifying the poor guy, he reminds me a lot of Gareth Morgan at this point, like 5 or 6 years ago. Just serious 70 raw power, 60 to 70 speed. I mean, the guy runs like a tank. He can really move. He can hit the ball out of the stadium, but he was missing breaking balls by feet, 10, 12 inches on these breaking balls. He was off timing. So I do love Baez. If we're talking about those position players, though, that really stood out, you just got to start this conversation with Benny, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think absolutely. Yeah, I brought up Baez.
Man.
I wanted to bring up my local guy, and he's somebody that you had sort of talked about and been into prior to even going to the event. And I'm excited because he's only about 25 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
I
mean, the thing,
not
Baez is,
Debbie for you.
He's another one of those guys that's just, he's like Benny in the fact that he's got, he might have 3 or 4 plus tools, but if you can't hit 200, you can't play ball.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that ends up happening. Tell me your thoughts on Benny, because I know he's so young. And the industry there's already a little bit of a divisive profile there on, what his future outcome, future value is.
Before we jump into Benny, let me just throw one more pitcher at you, and then we'll jump into Benny and we'll go into some of the hitters. What were your thoughts on Chase Petty? I wasn't sure if you were up early enough to sort of catch him. He's athletic. It's kind of a fun operation. He was 95, 96. There was some big stuff, really low slot, low release point. And he showed great feel for a changeup. He is a changeup before breaking ball guy in terms of his secondaries, which isn't always great from the prep side of things, but he showed great feel for the pitch. It had great arm side run, and it paired well with a fastball, which, was pretty electric. Did you have a chance to go back and take a look at Petty?
I did. I got a good look at Petty. He was like 95, 96, 97. In previous clips that I had seen of Petty, I was expecting to see that low 80s wipeout slider a little bit more. The changeup looked good. High 80s, low 90s changeup it's firm and it fades and it's a good pitch. But the only thing I fear with Petty is whether or not he's going to be able to be a rotation guy. And I know it's really early to be talking about role, and it's too early to be talking about what a guy is going to be worth. But if we're trying to decide if we're talking about first round picks, if we're talking about second round picks, then the question begs, does this guy have 3 pitches, and is that violent delivery going to be able to hold up? Now, in 1 or 2 innings over 40 pitches, yeah, the guy looked elite. He overmatched most of the hitters that he went up against, but I wanted to see that breaking ball a little bit more. I love the release point. It's a low release point that allows his fastball to probably look like 105 when it's at the top of the zone. But yeah, I love the package that Petty is. I just wonder what his ultimate future value is, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but
No, yeah. I mean, and, obviously, depending, all these guys are coming out of the shutdown. We don't necessarily know.
yeah,
He's an interesting, profile. He's an interesting athlete. There's some stuff there. But yeah, it wasn't like he was coming out like Painter or even a guy like Jump.
right,
Over some of those other names that we mentioned where they were showing a little bit more control across the arsenal. And I think really more command of their fastball too, in terms of all four quadrants, especially in the
yeah,
upper quadrants, where
yeah,
it kind of bled a little bit on Petty from time to time, but it was a good showing. But getting back to your question on Benny Montgomery and some of the questions on the profile, and I think a lot of it is surrounding that quirkiness. And there's a lot of Hunter Pence is always the guy that comes up for people with that sort of profile. But I think a guy like Kyle Tucker was like that in a lot of ways. Connor Scott, who wasn't nearly as polished as Montgomery is, and I don't think the tools were nearly as loud, even though he was tooled up and was a top 15 pick. Montgomery was a guy, huge arm. The exit velocities are there when he makes his best contact, but there is some question just because of that swing path, and he gets out in his front foot a lot, can get fooled by some breaking balls, but he's got really quick hands, and he shows the ability to make some adjustments, which, I think sort of plays in his favor. Decent angle on the bat as well when he does get full extension, but there's some question there. He flies down the line. He's an easy plus runner, maybe even bordering on double plus, but I would say easy plus. And there's some pop in the package and everything else. So it's an all-around tool set. And, he's certainly a long-term outfielder with, the ability, I think, with all of his skills there to be a center fielder. It's just how much is he going to hit? Is the hit tool long-term a 4? Can he get it up to a 5? And if it is that 5, I think that takes that power to another level, and he really gets to tap into that at maturity. He's a great athlete. I mean, that's the thing. Even though he's unique and quirky, it's not like he's not coordinated or what have you. It's just a really weird setup at the plate. But what are your thoughts on Montgomery?
Yeah, that's kind of where the division comes from. It's just is that quirky swing going to be able to play at the next level? It's worked for guys. I mean, before the show we were talking about Brad Miller is another guy that keeps his hands really, really low. He lags them back as long as you can lag them back, and then it's all core strength, and he just whips it through. And that's why Montgomery gets those elite barrel velocities. It's clear that the kid has plus power. The body just suggests that he's going to put on serious weight, and he could tap into some serious raw power here in no time at all. But yeah, I mean, is he going to be able to be even a fringe average hitter is the question. So I'm really excited. He's kind of got that similarity to Josh Baez in the fact that he's got 3 really loud tools in the arm, the run, and the power. It's just a matter of is Benny going to be able to sink or swim with that hit tool? It is unorthodox, and it is fun. I believe in it. I wish he would have done a little bit more in game to show that he could barrel up pitches. He did hit a foul ball really far, but the other ones were weak ground balls to short and a weak comebacker to the catcher or to the pitcher. So not a great showing in that sense, but as Benny does, the BP was pretty impressive.
Well, speaking of somebody who was really impressive in BP, we talked about his sort of variable bat angle. So one of the things that Nathaniel Plotz always sort of talks about. But Ian Moeller was a guy that showed up in game. That was the question coming in. Always has allowed BP. The setup, the operation at the plate looks beautiful.
It's quiet.
But it's loud contact, and it's leverage for power is the right way to say it, and that's not saying that it's huge, but it's a clean uppercut swing. He gets great loft on it, great separation. And it's not long, it's compact, all that sort of stuff. And he's great behind the plate. I mean, he showed in game behind the plate. We never had any doubts about his ability, as an athletic catcher with the catch and throw ability as good as anybody in the class.
Right.
But he sort of took that to the next level in game, throwing guys out, making some great plays, showing the ability to sort of handle the pitching staff and all different types of movement on pitches throughout the few games that he showed behind the plate. And then he hit some absolute shots in game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was loud. It was a loud.
It sounded different. It was just different with Moeller. He didn't have a bad at bat. And when you're in a showcase against pitchers that have been throwing, and you're a guy who's just been in a cage taking hacks at a machine, you're going to be at an enormous disadvantage. And he bombed by balls to right field. He bombed by balls to left field, and all of it sounded loud. For me, we haven't gotten a good enough chance to see Brady House, and Brady House wasn't at the event, and we've talked about Brady House in the past. That performance for me put Ian Moeller on the map as potentially having as good a hit tool. I'm not going to talk about power, but as good a hit tool as Brady House, as far as the most polished hitter at 17 years old right now. Behind the plate, he was flexible. He was agile. He handled the pitching staff well. The pop times were good. He was throwing runners out. I mean, I don't know what more Ian Moeller could have done to improve his stock anymore. I mean, the only thing with Moeller at this point is he's a high school catcher, and high school catchers have a very hard time of going up and early in these drafts. So, yeah, he really showed out for me. There's another catcher that I wanted to talk about that I thought really stood out, and that's Carter Jensen. Here's a guy that not a lot of people had heard of at the time, but he really came out and he had loud at bats. He had the best pop time of anyone in drills, and he's already got the frame that suggests, he could be even more than what he showed. So, what are your thoughts on Carter Jensen? I know that he was kind of someone that really popped for a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him. He's an LSU kid.
Yeah, I thought Jensen defensively was the other standout besides Moeller, and I don't think we even had necessarily expected it. But he made some tremendous throws. I thought he showed skills as a receiver. And, I even thought at the plate, I mean, he's a big, strong, physical, left-handed hitter. He showed some real pull side juice in the bat as well. He's a really interesting guy with a legit tool belt, There's a lot of stuff here defensively and offensively that can make him a legit player. Be interesting to see if he gets on campus at LSU or how much he climbs off of that performance and over the next year. Just because he showed well, and he was a guy that was not on my radar at all. I don't know if Jensen was really on your radar.
No,
coming in at all. I don't even think he was on our top 150 when we were coming into the event. So he was a guy that we added on to, and I thought he was tremendous defensively, and showed a lot of promise offensively as well. Who were some other bats that sort of stuck out to you? I know I have a couple here from the shortstop class. We'll talk about some guys that fell in a little bit, but focusing on the positive. I thought Jordan Lawler was excellent. I thought he really differentiated himself from Leto and some of the other guys. And I thought Alex Mooney showed really well. Obviously, I'll say that we're a little bit close to the program there, as our good friend of the show, Brian Sikowski's his hitting coach at his high school. So we'll see Mooney here. But honestly, he showed well. He hit a ball 98 miles per hour. He made some great plays in the field. One that I thought was an absolute hit that he robbed and made a great throw on. And I thought he showed well in batting practice. But he and Lawler, for me, were sort of the two guys in that prep middle infielder class that we've trumpeted so much in our articles, and then obviously our first edition of this show. Those two guys really, really showed well for me. What are your thoughts on them and maybe some others as well?
Yeah, I thought Lawler and Mooney really stood out as two guys that are going to stick at the position, and I think that's really important. There's two more prep shortstops that really caught my eye. The first one that I wasn't expecting was Michael Braswell. I thought Michael Braswell was far more polished than I was personally expecting him to come out. He had a really good arm, incredibly quick feet, and good actions for the position. I was really impressed with how he went to his right and came in on the ball for a guy that he's 6'2", 190. He's got a pretty big frame. He moves very, very. He's got incredibly quick feet. Looked pretty good on the mound too. So I'm excited to see what Braswell can do moving forward, and whether or not he can continue to grow into a little bit more power. Because right now, that's my only question on him: is he going to have an impact bat?
Mhm.
The other guy that I think is the polar opposite of that is Christian Moore.
Yeah.
This is a kid that is listed at shortstop, but he's also already 6'1", 205. And so, having not seen a ton of Christian Moore, I was thinking, well, he's going to be a little bit sluggish on the dirt. You're looking at a left field, third base type. No, I mean, he held every bit of his own on the dirt. He was very impressive at short, big arm, which is a little bit to be expected of a guy that's 200 pounds, but moved into the hole to his right really nicely, moved to his left and stayed balanced and centered really well for a guy that's 200 pounds. But frankly, and I know this might be a hot take, Christian Moore might have had the most impressive batting practice of anyone in the entire showcase for me.
Yeah, maybe him and Moeller were up there.
Yeah, those two.
I wanted
Anyone.
I want to throw out a couple more names in terms of some bats that stuck out to me. More from the power side. One guy that I thought was awesome was James Woods. He was early on, a guy that I immediately moved on. If I remember correctly, he's a Maryland kid as well, right?
He's a Northeast kid, and he is like 80% legs. James Wood is
Maryland and New York. I couldn't remember. Might even be Pennsylvania, but big power guy, as you said, 80%. What is he, 6'5", 6'6"?
6'6". He's from IMG Academy. Yeah.
But the thing that was kind of funny about him is as large as he was, it was a relatively compact operation in stroke. I mean, there was no issues getting, inside on anything and turning on something. He made tons of loud contact, and you could tell that it was a balanced profile of, there's power there and more that he can probably tap into, and he's not even necessarily fully leveraged for power, but can just shoot, like massive exit velocity line drives right back at the pitcher and make him duck. He's that kind of hitter. And there's a few ways you could go. You hope he doesn't go with, I guess it's sort of the cliche way to put it, is the James Loney path, where he's only a line drive guy. But I was really impressed with the plate approach in game, and then just the ability to make consistent, good barrel contact. I thought he stood out quite a bit. And another guy I wanted to mention was Luke Hefner. I don't know if you remember him. He had a loud BP, and he did. He shot a ball out to right field, and then stole second on a fastball on the same play. And bad throw, but he made it happen. And then I would be remiss not to mention Big Mac's son, Max McGuire, had a loud PG National. I think the loudest thing about him was the bat wiggle before he hits.
Dude, it's so spot on.
Anybody that grew up watching Mark McGuire and sees shades of that with his kid just wants to cheer for him. So I don't know how much hype McGuire's getting simply because of who he is and what his setup is, but he did hit, and he made some loud contact. He put some balls over the fence, so he was carrying on the family name. What were your thoughts about some of those guys and maybe some other hitters that weren't shortstops that stood out to you?
Yeah, I really like Woods. He has another one there's a lot of preps this year that have just heavy rotational swings, and it can kind of get away from him a little bit, but he does do a good job on most pitches of keeping his hands inside and staying compact. But yeah, I don't know if that's just why there's so many of these heavy rotational swings that have guys facing the dugout after the end of their at bat. But anyways, he's an impressive specimen to me. I do like McGuire. It is spitting image, man. It
really is.
He looks exactly like his dad. When he did that bat wiggle, I didn't even know McGuire's kid was going to be in the showcase. And when he did the bat wiggle, I dropped my controller. I was like, oh man, I wonder who this kid's hitting coach is. Yeah, no, I appreciated that. And then a couple more guys that I kind of wanted to bring up here before we move on. I thought Cody Schreier really impressed me.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
He's a guy that was already on a lot of people's radars, and so you can't really say, Cody Schreier really popped, but he's got this lanky 6-foot frame, but there's a lot of good muscle on it, and his batting practice was just it was polished, and even more than anything at the plate, I thought his actions at shortstop were really impressive, because some people have thought that Schreier's going to have to move off the position. I didn't think that might be necessary. He moved himself into probably Group 1B for me. If it's Lawler and Mooney, and then for me, you'd have Moore, Braswell, and Schreier. And then I think the next guy we're going to talk about.
Don't forget Marcelo Mayer. I know he wasn't there, but you can't
Well,
put him out of your team.
Mayer. So you got 1A, 1B, and then you have one Mayer. So no. So the next guy that we have to talk about is Luke Leto, right? The Wonder Kid. So Leto, for me, the bat was really impressive in game. In game, I thought he was making loud contact. He was short to the ball, spraying the ball with purpose, hitting the ball hard. The barrel sounded loud. He cuts off the swing almost like a bad golfer. He cuts it off at the top instead of fully extending, which is something that I think he can work out of his swing. But on the dirt, I'm not gonna pound on the kid or rag on the kid because there's a year before the draft and there's a lot of time. But he looked stiff. He looked stiff, and he looked like he had trouble going to his left and his right. And for a guy that has been lauded as a potential top 10 pick and someone that has a super high ceiling, he didn't do it for me quite like some of the other kids did. What are your thoughts?
I tend to agree. And, there was this conversation of Michigan shortstops. And I think most people sort of were leaning on the Leto side, obviously based on my relationship. I was hearing Mooney for a while. And I think one of the things you're starting to see, and it's unfortunately one of the things we sort of heard whispered in the industry for a year or so now, and it came to fruition, is that he's not the same prospect he was when he was 15 years old, that he's backed up a little bit in terms of the overall skill set and just how loud the tools project out to be. He made some great play. He made a great play to his left in game where he came across and made a throw over to first base. It was real balanced. And you saw the athleticism and the footwork when it is on. You saw why this kid's also, a two-sport star,
Sure.
The quarterback. I started to wonder if he's going to end up playing quarterback. I've heard he's all baseball. And then batting practice looked out of sync, I think is the best way to put it, And he he shot a couple of singles in games. So he did hit in game. It wasn't a terrible performance, but it wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination. He didn't make loud contact. It was more, shooting a single up, which is fine. And hey, guys get on base and they're making contact. And we know about the shutdown and all that sort of stuff. I just wonder how much the shutdown affected him and how much he might be sliding back as well. So we moved him back in our rankings, but, certainly he's an immensely talented player. And this is a guy that, at one point in the, not too distant past was considered one of the top prep players in this class. He's moved out of that top 5 for me pretty easily, but, I'm not writing the kid off at all because
no. And I think it's
uneven performance. It wasn't a terrible performance. It was very uneven. And I think, the fielding drills showed worse maybe than anything else did. And
I agree. And it's not a bad thing if Luke Leto moves to third base. The prerequisite of this conversation is we had Leto penciled in as a shortstop. Yeah. And when you show how you did on the dirt at shortstop in those drills, it makes you feel more comfortable with moving him to third and judging him on his merits there. I'm by no means putting a comp on Leto, but when I was watching him at the plate and when I was watching him in the field, he reminded me a little bit more of Matt Carpenter than he did like a shortstop. And like I said, that's not a comp by any means, but I don't get like dynamic athlete vibes from him anymore like we did a year ago. And if he has to slide over to the right, we can rejudge his prospect status at that point.
Yeah, agree. Were there some other bats that sort of didn't show well for you? I'll name one that we sort of talked about off air and kind of broke my heart a little bit. I knew it was coming. Was Braylon Bishop just did not look like himself at the plate. I think you see him. He's a great athlete. The tools are there. We've seen video and we've heard from folks that have seen him at his best. what the swing looks like, and he can make loud contact, and it looks like a future star. He looked lackadaisical at times at the plate, and it was a tough showing because he's one of my favorite prospects in the draft, and you kind of had to take a long look at the mirror and say this guy's got to move down a little bit, simply because the polish wasn't there and he didn't show. Once again, not a guy we're going to write off, but
Sure.
Redon and Bishop in our initial list, two very highly ranked players that didn't show very well. So what were your thoughts on Bishop?
The questions on Bishop are surrounding his swing, and when you're a guy like Bishop that makes your money on going all out on a lot of swings, and you're faced against premier talent, you can really get exposed a little bit. And the in-game performance wasn't great, but the batting practice performance, there wasn't impact barrel there. He didn't hit balls. I don't know if he hit a ball to the warning track. He wasn't driving balls into the gap. So Bishop, he was a little bit disappointing for me. But again, we have a year until the draft, and This is a guy that is clearly, you could see it on the field. He's a premier athlete. He's tooled. So we'll see where he goes over the next year. I'm certainly not writing the guy off. No. A couple of guys that stood out for me that were a little bit disappointing. I thought Rock Reggio I was hoping for a little bit more from Rock. He's a super utility guy that he's built like a bulldog. He can play anywhere on the field. But he didn't find a barrel all week, and that includes batting practice. He was hitting infield pop flies. He was hitting ground balls to the second baseman. So I'm just expecting to see a better performance from Rock Reggio in our next iteration of this. And then the other guy that I was hoping for a little bit more from, and this is simply because of his swing, and it's just philosophically not where baseball is going, is Christian Campbell.
Yeah.
Another up the middle shortstop. Really good barrel velo and incredibly quick feet at the position. Not taking anything away from him at shortstop. I think he can stick at the position, but he's got that D. Gordon swing where he's coming down through the ball. It's a flat barrel angle, and there's just not impact. There's not an impact bat in that swing. And so I have some concerns with Christian Campbell in that regard, but I don't take anything away from the player that he is. It's just philosophically, it's not my swing.
What are your thoughts on Isaac Pacheco?
He's a big boy.
He is a big boy. Yeah, that's he looks like a third baseman already, and not in a bad way. He's not. This isn't like a Tristan Cassis sort of like large adult son sort of body. It's muscular and strong. But what were your thoughts on Pacheco? And I don't know, the swing looks pretty, but I have questions about how much he's going to hit for power in game, especially against good pitching, because a lot of his previous in-game performance has been against guys throwing in the low 80s. Yeah,
see, I have questions about the swing. He clearly has big raw power. The kid is already a 6'4", 220-pound shortstop. He uses his body very, very well. But for me, the swing, it got a little long at times, which didn't hurt him in the power category just because he's so big. But more than anything with Pacheco, I was impressed with him on defense. I still don't think he's a shortstop, but the arm really showed out, and he moves really well for a kid that's his size. But I have a hard time finding Pacheco ending up at shortstop. He reminds me a little bit of Kyle Schwarber at the plate in the way that his trigger mechanisms work and how he can get a little bit pull happy. But God, Leaf, when I was 17, I did not look like any of these players. These kids are getting so big.
I think Pacheco is one of those guys where there's some tweaks that need to be made in the swing. Just in terms of timing and getting into his lower half a little bit more, and just being able to get that barrel to hang in the zone a little bit more, because I think his angle isn't necessarily conducive to that. But he was also a guy that you saw it. I felt like when you saw Pacheco, all right, this is a guy that has the physical tools to turn into a power hitting third baseman and fit that role. And that's something when we're looking at these showcases that I'm always trying to figure out is like, what long-term role can this guy fit if, the athleticism doesn't necessarily stay at the level it's at when you're 17, 18 years old. And for most of these guys, that's going to be the case.
Yeah. It's an impact bat. It's an impact bat.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any doubt about that. And he's athletic enough that makes me think he can stay on the left side of dirt. It's just he's just young. I mean, there's so much teaching and grooming that will go into his player between now and even a year from now. And the more he sees this premier talent, he's going to be a bat. He's going to be a bat.
I don't think I was going to ask if there were any arms that sort of stood out to you as not all that exciting. I know we already talked about Christian Little, but any arms that you felt didn't show well over the course of the showcase that you were excited to see coming in. I don't think there were that many just because of what the setup is, but I won't answer for you, and I'll kick it over to you, Joe.
As far as arms go, not really. One guy that we didn't bring up that I thought was really good was Philip Abner, even though it wasn't like the most explosive stuff, but I don't know if you could argue that he wasn't the most polished pitcher there. I mean, he threw every pitch he threw like 70% strikes, and he was mixing in everything. I'll say this. I'll give you one pitcher that I was hoping to see a little bit more from, and that was I just lost his name. Chase Burns.
Really?
Chase Burns. I don't know. I was expecting a little bit more from Chase Burns in terms of what I had heard about him going into the event, and he didn't show out. He just didn't show out to me that much. He kind of caught me off guard with that one.
Oh, there you go. I hit you with the off guard.
You did.
Question about bad pitching. Well, let's wrap it up because we're going on 40 minutes here, and I think we've covered the majority of the event and the highlights. But any players that we haven't already mentioned that you were impressed by, that you want to sort of trumpet here at the end and make up for? It's almost like a mulligan at the end of the show.
Sure. A couple of guys that really stood out for me. I thought Malachi Knight he's an Oregon State kid.
One of your local boys.
He's a local boy, and I didn't go into it with any bias. I really didn't, but he showed really good bat-to-ball skills. I thought he showed more pop than he's previously shown out here in Washington. He's always been a premier defender, but he actually looked like he could be an impact bat. Casey Salk was a shortstop out of Athena, Georgia, that I thought looked like he could definitely be a big league hitter with a big frame, a super projectable frame. I don't know where this next guy profiles at the next level, but I thought Carlos Pena looked every bit the part of a big league hitter. A lot of questions across the diamond on, where he goes. And then the last guy that I'd like to point out is Jaden Melendez. And Melendez, I never expected him to be a big impact guy at the plate, and the leg kick that he's got is still inhibiting him from being able to show any, reasonable hit tool. But that kid is maybe the most advanced defensive catcher in this class, and he was just showing off in front of those guys. So I really liked Melendez. Yeah,
he's another standout defensive catcher that we didn't touch on, of course. His father's a college coach was it FIU? Is that the school that he's at, or is it Florida Atlantic? I always get.
No, I think it is FIU. And his brother, or is it his cousin?
Yeah, no, his brother is MJ Melendez of the Kansas City Royals.
He might be one of the best defensive catchers in baseball, even though he doesn't play much.
Yeah, if only he could figure out how to make a little bit more contact. But Melendez is a very exciting player, and as is his brother. Another guy I wanted to throw out there was Thomas DeLandry. I thought he looked really good. One moment that stuck out to me is he sat back on a fastball from Hartle and just knocked it between the third baseman and the shortstop to his pull side. And, he dropped his hands. He put a great swing on it, tooled up. He ran a 6.7 60, and he throws 95 miles per hour from the outfield. So that was a guy I thought needed to be mentioned. And then probably one of my favorite bats that we hadn't mentioned earlier was DeLeo Lyle
Oh yeah.
Game, just a big, tall hitter with a good bat to ball skills. He drove a ball, I think like 97 or 98 to the gap on a hang and breaking ball to the opposite field. And he just showed great feel to hit. I thought hit tool wise, he was probably one of the better standouts of the entire event for me. Any other guys that stuck out to you?
We hit on Abner. I thought Ryan Spikes looked every bit the part of a big league shortstop. He even showed out on the mound a little bit. And then one guy, Anthony Susak. He's a right-handed pitcher, big tall kid, 6'3", 6'4". He had a really hard time spotting his pitches, and I think some of that can be chalked up to nerves. And he also ended up throwing like 55 pitches in 2 innings. But the pitches that he was landing looked really good. They looked like strong offerings. The changeup, is really nice. Nasty. It's a nasty changeup. So he's going to be another one for us to watch for the next year.
And that is Andrew's brother for everybody that's out there wondering.
Yeah, he's another one of the Susaks.
Clan.
Not a catcher. This one's not a catcher.
One in the same Susak. Another guy that showed a lot of tools for me on both sides of the ball was Jackson Baumeister. I don't know if he's going to hit in game, and I almost wonder if he ends up a pitcher. I was actually I thought he shows athleticism behind the plate. He can show it even at the plate with his setup because he's a good athlete. I was more impressed with him on the mound.
He's a big kid too. I mean, I think Baumeister's 6'4".
He is. He's
already a big catcher, and if he gets any bigger, he might be forced out from behind the plate anyways, although he's a good athlete. But yeah, the tools are obviously there. It's just a matter of is he going to be able to stick at the position? So
I don't think he's going to hit. So that's why I almost feel like pitch kid, because you showed me something.
Yeah, I mean, he did show the capability to be able to handle it on the mound. One other thing that I wanted to talk about here really quick before we kind of end this one is this list right now is obviously it's prep heavy. I mean, and the draft is never this prep heavy, but I think that we should preface this list by saying this is what we have access to right now. These are the eyes that we can put on these players, and this is the up-to-date information that we're getting from scouts and evaluators and analysts, and even ourselves on what we're seeing on film. So I want to kick this question to you. While we're talking very highly on a lot of these preps, what is this draft class going to look like in the middle of June 2021? Should we expect this many preps to be first-round guys?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're going to – what we don't have right now is, college guys that popped and showed it in conference, especially guys that – might have been a little bit under the radar at SEC or ACC or even Pac-12 or Big Ten schools, where we know there's a lot of great programs now and a high competition level. We didn't have that. And then we don't have those guys, especially with a college pitching class, where maybe they showed improvement in their sophomore year. There's a lot of guys like this every year. Showed improvement in their sophomore year, might even been, in a high leverage bullpen role. They're being transitioned to this, starting rotation for their junior year. Typically guys like that with big stuff, a guy like Alec Manoah or Graham Stinson from a few years ago, right, get down to the Cape Cod or, out to the Cape Cod League, and they'll have that opportunity to work with coaching, work on starting, try out different things in their arsenal. And a lot of those guys come out of the Cape taking that huge step forward where maybe they weren't even a day one guy to being a top 20, even top 10 pick. We saw it last season with Carmen Mazinski. It was exactly one of those guys. So I think that's something that we're missing this year. So that's a component that it's really tough to sort of factor in. Now, I know that there's a handful of wooden bat leagues going on. I believe Northwoods is going to be kicking off, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't double check it recently. Futures League around me, for the most part, is going to be playing. So I'm going to be able to see some of these guys. I wonder how many players maybe end up on rosters just looking to get some reps. And I had even seen somebody talking yesterday about the Florida Wooden Bat League and some of the outfields and some of the teams that were out there with some decent names. So maybe they don't end up down the Cape. I don't know what the plan is with the national team, but we didn't get a lot of those breakouts. So it's sort of tough to evaluate the college class based on things that really we knew a year ago and got a very small glimpse of for a few weeks early this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's going to be guys in this class that are going to pop. It's a matter of time. Last year I was talking to Mason a little bit about this earlier today, and before the Cape Cod League in 2019, you had 5, maybe 6 pitchers that had first round grades on them. You had the Hancocks, the Myers, Detmers, Cavalli, Ciccone. This year, we don't have first round grades right now on guys like Jack Perkins and Christian McLeod and Stephen Hajar. I know we do, but not a lot of people do. Ben Specht, Ty Madden, Jonathan Cannon. There's going to be guys that pop and establish themselves as true first round talents. And it's not that the high school players that we're talking about aren't supremely talented, because they are, but in really a redefined scouting sense, now that there's less rounds in the draft and people are going for safety and a financial crunch, people are going to lean towards college players. And so these guys are going to pop. And then, you got your Ethan Wilsons and you got your Levi Ushers and you got these players, Sal Frelick. They're going to move way up boards. They're going to show out and they're going to be very enticing picks in the top 15. So I'm really excited for college ball to get going. I do love the preps, but it's a lot to dream on with these kids. And some of them are just starting to show out more than others. If I were to put you on the hot seat right now, last question, I love doing this. Give me a number on how many preps are taken in the first round. And for bonus points, I'll let you look at the top 50 and you can name who you think is a first round pick.
Oof.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that this early, but I'd say, I put it comfortably because we'll actually have 30 picks in the first round this year, unless somebody else gets caught cheating. So,
no, we'll have 29. We'll still have 29.
We still have 29. Why? Who doesn't have a first round pick next year?
Houston, 2 years in a row.
Oh, it is 2 years in a row. So we still only have 29. I'm pretty comfortable saying 12.
Okay.
I think Brady House, easy first rounder. I think we both think Mayer's a first rounder. Ian Muller's a first rounder to me. I think Benny Montgomery's a first rounder. Lawler's a first rounder. We didn't talk about Tyree Reed, but I think Tyree Reed's a first rounder. Alec Mooney, of course. Isaac Pacheco, first rounder for me. I guess we're still there on Leto. We're still there.
He's still
those guys off. Jay Allen, I think, is a first rounder. Andrew Painter cemented himself as a first rounder. And then you have guys like, Christian Moore, even someone like Irvin Carter or Petty. And we can go right down the line of a bunch of different names that we've already rattled off. All those guys can find themselves in the mix. So I'm pretty comfortable saying sort of a dozen, I would say is probably a good number. And team's going to have a little bit bigger bonus pool. So I think they might be a little bit more aggressive. Of course, we're guessing on this a year in the future.
Totally guessing.
We hope everything works out. But if everything goes to plan and it's a normal draft, I wouldn't be shocked if teams make a little bit heavier investment in preps earlier on, knowing that they can bump some guys down, et cetera, et cetera. But should be fun to see. I was going to say maybe next week we should dive a little bit more into the college class.
Yeah.
Focus on that. We gave the prep class plenty of time today on the show. This was the second edition, the PG National Special of the Prospects Live MLB Draft Show, focusing on the 2021 draft. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.